Hi, this is Matt with Beard Implement Company. I'm here with you today going over a few pre-season checks on a MacDon Draper head. Here on the drive end, we have a drive belt. You want to roll it around, make sure there's no cracks or anything coming apart on that. And a proper tension is if you could just twist the belt, but not much deflection up and down. Moving forward, we have the Wobble box drive for the Sickle. On the underneath the breather here, it has a dipstick on it. So you just want to let your head down level and then pull the dipstick. Make sure you got good oil in the gearbox before you start. Around here to the drive head on the Sickle, has a grease zerd on it. Takes 1 or 2 pumps every 25 hours. Do not over grease it. If you over grease it, this is actually a trapped pin, so that when you put grease in it, it actually pushes the head of the Sickle down, and it'll break it off because it puts it in a bind on the first guard. Moving on to the Sickle, you need to look at the edge of the guards to make sure they're still sharp. If they get rounded off, we can have brand new sections and a dull guard, and we will still have poor performance. And the duller the guard, the more strain it is on the gearbox and the drive head and the whole drive components. So you want to make sure before the start of the season we got good sharp guards that will make it through the season to have good performance. Another thing to look at on your Sickle is your hold downs that hold your Sickle down to the bottom of your guard. You want to make sure that they're good and snug, not real tight that you can't move the Sickle forward and back, but you want them just snug enough that you can't pick up on the Sickle. That way it holds the Sickle down on the sharp part of the guard instead of trying to cut on the top of the guard. We want to make sure we're cutting on the bottom. Right. Moving on to the center Draper belt. One of the indicators of how much wear is on your belt is if you look right where the material comes off the side belt onto the center Draper, there will be a wear pattern there where it goes from a black belt to the white cords, and then it'll wear through the white cords into the inner layer of rubber and turn black again. So I recommend if you start the season with white cords showing that are starting to fray, I would recommend changing the belt. But if you start with a black belt and it turns white during the season, you're still good, and you can wear it all the way until you wear about a 5 or 6 inch circle of black on the inner layer of rubber before you really need to worry about it. Moving on to the side Drapers, we want to take a close look at the seam where the two ends of the belt come together. And I've seen a lot of these belts where this front edge will rip off, and if you catch it before it gets too bad, so if there's only like 1 inch to 2 inches of belt that's stuck out where it's folded over, we can trim that off with a razor. Just trim that lip off, and we can still run the belt and get some life out of it. But if that starts to tear more than a couple inches, it affects how much material gets by our deck seal, and we'll end up with a lot of material build up inside the belt, and then that'll cause problems where the rollers will stop turning or the belt will stop turning. So if you do happen to see a belt that's starting to tear, just trim it off as long as it's only 1 inch or 2 long. If it's past that 1 inch or 2, then I recommend changing the belt. Moving on to the center feed drum. A couple things to look at here. Make sure there's no missing fingers or bent fingers, and then take a close look at the plastic guides that go around the finger. And we want to, as long as the guide isn't wore into the metal, it's still doing its job. If you're close to the metal at the start of the season, I would recommend changing them. I don't want to see you run them until they get into the metal. So if you're halfway to the metal, I would say replace the plastic finger guides. And then of course, if there's a damaged, bent, missing fingers like that, we need to get those replaced. Another thing to look at on the feed drum is the drive chain on the left side underneath these plastic shields right on the end. The factory style chain is a endless chain, which is a little more involved to change. You got to take a few more things apart to get it on there. I've seen several replaced with a standard chain with a master link, and they will work for a while until the master link comes apart, and then it wads the chain up inside there and tears up the end of the drum and the shields. So if your chain is due to be changed, I would recommend pre-season, while you have time, to go ahead and put the factory style endless chain on it, and it'll be way more reliable in season and not have to worry about that master link coming apart. Moving on to the reel. In the very center of the reel, there is a drive chain. So the hydraulic motor drives the drive chain, and then where the reel flexes, the two halves flex, there's a U-joint. So we want to take this shield off and inspect this chain and make sure it's in good shape. Change it if it needs it. Also make sure we're greasing the greaser on the U-joints in here. They're kind of hard to find. There's just a little access hole, and it usually never lands where you can see it. We'll have to turn the reel around until we line it up with the hole. Make sure you get it greased. Moving around to the back of the head here, we have behind this shield is a hydraulic oil filter that we need to change every year. And I would recommend every 2 to 3 years, depending on your acres, go ahead and change the hydraulic oil at the same time, which in this model, the FD70, FD75s, is 30 weight engine oil. Another thing to take a look at pre-season is to get our torque wrench out and check the weight of our header. So that is the adjustment of these big springs right here on these two adjusting bolts. There's 2 on this side, 2 on the other. So we want to unlock the lower part of the head, the float part, but leave the wings locked, and then we'll put it on the adjuster down here, and we'll push down on it and take a reading on the torque wrench to see how heavy or how light the head is. I like to run them about 2. So 2 on the torque wrench down. When you push down, it only goes up to 2. And if it's too heavy, we will tighten these up. These springs on this side and there's springs on the other side. We can change independently from one side to the other. But I recommend changing the 2 springs on one side the same amount of turns. So let's say we're 3 on the torque wrench, so we're a little heavy. So we'll go, say, just 2 turns on this spring and 2 turns on this spring with the adjuster bolt, and then we'll recheck. And if that gets us down to 2, then we'll go over to the other side and check it. If it needs adjusting, fine. If it's right at 2, we'll leave it alone. But you don't have to change both sides the same. We just need to change the pair of springs the same amount of turns. That way we got an equal amount of load on each spring instead of over tightening one spring and then it failing. Moving on to our wing balance adjustments. If you take your torque wrench and unlock the wings and put your torque wrench on the adjusting bolt here, we can pull down and push up and take the reading on the torque wrench on both sides. So up is one way and down is the other, and you'll get 2 different readings. I like to keep them close to equal, so about 2.5 up, 2.5 down, and that will get a equal performance wing up flex and wing down flex. If you make it heavy on the wings, so if the head frowns, your wings will be too heavy, and it will wear your skid shoes out on the end of your wings prematurely. And if you have your head as a smile and it's too light on the wings, then you will have trouble with the header not wanting to follow the ground. So if you go over a terrace or something, it'll want to ride up in the air instead of following the contour of the ground. If you need to make an adjustment, it is just a 3/4 wrench is all you need. Do not ever adjust the big bolts. So if you need to adjust wing balance, a 3/4 wrench is all you need. So we will loosen up the clamp bolt right here and adjust the threaded adjuster bolt. And there's a little sticker here that tells you which way to move it. So if you move the adjuster out, it will make the wing lighter. If you move the adjuster in, it will make the wing heavier. So depending on what your torque wrench reading is, which way you need to go, it's a pretty simple adjustment. Another thing to take a look at and not to overlook is this greaser right here. It's under these black covers. You do have to take the bolt out and take the cover off to get them greased. I've seen that they get forgotten a lot because you have to actually remove the cover to get to them. So just keep that in mind when you're servicing your header. Make sure you take these black shields off and get this greaser at the same time.